What if I told you that America's 500 most powerful public companies have an average lifespan of just 8 years? Back in 1958, the average company stayed in the S&P 500 for 61 years. Today, that number has fallen to 1/8, a drop of more than two-thirds. The alarming part is not simply that major companies are disappearing faster. It is that many of them still have strong profits, huge markets, and thousands of talented employees right before they fall off the list. The most dangerous moment for a company may not be when it is losing money. Losses force everyone to search for a way out. Success does the opposite. It convinces people that whatever worked yesterday will keep working tomorrow. Kodak once dominated the global film market. Nokia once controlled more than 40% of the world's mobile phone market. Sears was once one of the most innovative retailers in America. These companies did not lack technology, talent, or money. Their real problem was that when a new world arrived, they were still protecting the victories they had won in the old one. So today, we are not going to ask how a company can survive for 100 years. We are going to ask a more important question. When does a company actually deserve to survive? The answer is not protecting the same product forever. It is not staying in the same industry forever either. Companies that survive major shifts usually protect something else, the ability to redefine who they are when their customers' lives change. Nintendo is a perfect example. In 1889, Nintendo began making and selling traditional Japanese playing cards called Hanafuda. There were no video games, no consoles, and no Mario. Nintendo started as a playing card company. If Nintendo had defined itself as a company that makes cards, it probably would have disappeared a long time ago. But Nintendo did not build its identity around the card itself. It built its identity around the need behind the card. Why are people willing to pay to play? What creates a shared experience for friends and families? Products can change, technologies can change. The medium of entertainment can change, but that underlying human desire remains. Nintendo eventually moved into toys and video games. What it sold changed completely, but the need it served did not. Instead of protecting one deck of cards, it kept searching for new forms of interactive entertainment. That gives us the first way to judge whether a company is built to last. Do not ask what it sells. Ask why customers are willing to pay for it. Many companies confuse their product with their identity. Film companies think they belong to the film business. Department stores think they belong to the physical retail business. Traditional media companies think they belong to paper and television. Once the product becomes obsolete, they assume the entire company has reached a dead end. But customers do not really buy product categories. They bought film to preserve memory. They bought newspapers to get information. They visited department stores because those stores made it easier to discover and choose products. When a company defines itself by its product, technological change becomes a threat. When it defines itself by the customer's need, new technology can become a tool. But seeing the need is not enough. Kodak saw digital photography very early. In 1975, Kodak engineer Steven Sasson built an early digital camera prototype. Kodak did not fail because it was unable to see the future. It failed to cross a second barrier. The new business threatened the old one. Every step forward for digital photography meant fewer rolls of film, fewer prints, and less photo paper. From the perspective of Kodak's future, digital technology deserved investment. From the perspective of its income statement at the time, it looked like Kodak was spending money to build its own attacker. That is one of the hardest problems any mature company faces. It can see the future. It just does not want the future to damage the present. So every new project runs into a wall of reasonable objection. The market is too small. The margins are too low. Customers are not ready. And this could hurt our existing products. Each objection makes sense on its own. Together, they can cause a company to miss an entire era. That leads to the second test of whether a company can transform. Has it set aside resources to disrupt itself? Real transformation cannot exist only inside a strategy document. A new business needs its own resources, its own performance standards, and enough room to make mistakes. If a young business is expected to match the profit margin of a mature business from day one, it will almost certainly be killed too early. New markets are usually small and unstable in the beginning. Companies have to accept an uncomfortable truth. If a new technology is eventually going to weaken your existing product, The best outcome is not preventing that from happening. The best outcome is making sure the attack comes from inside your own company. That may sound like deliberately damaging your own business, but if you refuse to do it, the market will eventually do it for you. And by then, you will no longer control the timing. Microsoft's transformation reveals another part of the problem. For a long time, Windows was almost synonymous with Microsoft. The company's business model, developer ecosystem, and internal power structure were all closely tied to the operating system. But as internet services, mobile devices, and cloud computing expanded, software was no longer something that simply lived on one personal computer. Customers increasingly wanted services they could access anywhere, online collaboration, and computing power available on demand. Microsoft did not abandon Windows, but it gradually expanded its center of growth toward cloud services and subscriptions. Before Satya Nadella became CEO, he led Microsoft's Cloud and Enterprise Group. Azure later became one of the company's core businesses. Microsoft's strength was not that it predicted every technological shift correctly. It missed opportunities. It launched products that failed. What mattered was that Microsoft eventually became willing to loosen its belief that Windows always had to sit at the center of everything. That reveals a third requirement for transformation. A company must allow its internal power structure to move toward the future. Many companies are happy to create an innovation department. They are far less willing to give that department money, talent, and decision-making power. The new team is asked to present the future. The old divisions continue controlling the resources. Eventually, innovation becomes a prototype at a trade show, a concept at a product launch, or a slide deck that never changes the core business. Real transformation always involves a redistribution of power. As a new business becomes more important, the people with the most influence inside the company should change as well. In the past, supply chain expertise may have carried the most weight. In the future, influence may need to shift toward people who understand data, software, design, or ecosystem partnerships. That is also why companies need to hire people who do not look like the rest of the organization. If everyone on the leadership team comes from the same industry, has a similar resume, and believes in the same success formula, reaching agreement becomes easy. But imagining a different future becomes difficult. In the short term, consensus makes decisions faster. In the long term, too much similarity gives the entire organization the same blind spot. A consumer products company hires AI engineers. A manufacturer brings in software product managers. A bank gives cybersecurity experts a seat at the main decision-making table. Those choices often create friction at first. But friction is not necessarily a problem. It may be evidence that old experience is no longer the only language spoken in the room. In recent years, L'Oreal has invested heavily in digital data and AI talent. It has also maintained a presence at technology events such as CES and VivaTech. The important point is not how many technology trends a cosmetics company can chase. It is that L'Oreal has deliberately entered conversations that once existed outside the beauty industry, because the force that truly changes an industry often comes from beyond that industry's borders. Smartphones changed cameras, software ecosystems changed phones, streaming changed television, e-commerce changed retail. If you only watch your competitors, you may understand what they plan to improve next. But you may never see what customers are preparing to abandon next. That is why a company that wants to extend its life needs more than competitive research. It needs an outside industry radar. Where is the customer's time moving? Which new technology is making an expensive service dramatically cheaper? What new habits are younger customers developing? Which overlooked customers are being served by small companies that the giants ignore? These questions may not produce revenue immediately, but they can help a company discover whether its business model is evolving or simply being bypassed. There is also a counter-argument that rarely receives enough attention. Is it always good for a company to live longer? Not necessarily. A corporation is not a person. It is not a historical monument that must be protected at any cost. A company exists to keep creating value for its customers, employees, and shareholders, not to celebrate another anniversary. When a company eventually leaves the market, that does not erase the value it created in the past. And when a brand survives for 100 years but has nothing left except a name and a sense of nostalgia, that is not real vitality either. Longevity should not be the goal by itself. What matters is whether a company can continue creating value. If the original need disappears, the company should be able to shrink, transform, or even end with dignity. Instead of using its old reputation to occupy resources it no longer puts to good use.
When we put these stories together, we get something more useful than another list of 3 secrets to success. We get 4 tests. First, the identity test.
If you remove the company's most profitable product, does it still know what problem it solves for the customer? Second, the cannibalization test. If a new business will reduce revenue from the old one, is the company still willing to fund it? Third, the power test. When a new capability becomes important, can the people who possess it earn a real seat at the decision-making table? Fourth, the radar. Beyond its competitors, does the company consistently watch technological, cultural, and consumer changes outside its own industry? These 4 questions tell us more about where a company may be 10 years from now than its current growth rate does. Profit only proves that yesterday's choices are still working for the moment. It does not prove that the organization will be able to turn when the next major shift arrives. Kodak's tragedy was not that it failed to invent. It was that when the future appeared, Kodak's first instinct was to protect the past. Nintendo survived for more than a century, not because playing cards never became obsolete, but because it never accepted playing cards as its final definition. Microsoft returned to growth not simply because it found a new product, but because it gradually accepted that the thing that once mattered most did not always have to remain at the center of the stage. Every company that survives has to do the same difficult thing: loosen its grip on its old identity before the outside world forces it to change. So the next time you see a company with enormous market share, extraordinary profits, and almost no visible competitors, do not only ask how powerful it is today, ask something else. If tomorrow's customers no longer need today's flagship product, will this company have the courage to become a different company? Companies do not die because they become too old. They die on the day they decide to stop answering that question.